the weight of memory. What does it feel like to carry someone else's memory, especially when you are too young to understand its meaning? The cases we've explored show that the burden of past life memories can be both eerie and emotionally overwhelming. The children experience these memories not as casual daydreams, but as lived realities intruding upon their current life. For the adults around them, parents, relatives, even the previous life's family, the emotional stakes are just as high. Reincarnation, as abstract as it sounds, becomes profoundly personal when it plays out through the tears, fears, and revelations of a child. Let's return to the human center of these stories, the children themselves and those who love them. We must remember that a child who blurts out, "I had another mother before you," is not trying to shock or confuse anyone. They are simply stating what to them feels true. Often they don't even realize that what they're saying is extraordinary. They might wonder why Mommy suddenly looks so hurt or frightened. In Samir's case, he likely didn't intend to upset his mother when he spoke of his other mother. He was just trying to reconcile his own experiences. In communities like Samir's Druze village, where such talk is not entirely unexpected, the adults still react with a mix of surprise and concern. They know the child is serious, but they also know the road ahead could be fraught with turmoil. For the child, the weight of memory often manifests in intense emotions and behaviors. They might cry for people they've never met in this life, out of a longing that defies logic. Some become depressed or solemn beyond their years, as if carrying the sorrow of their former death on their small shoulders. Others become fixated on going back to their previous family or home, which can be heart-wrenching for their current parents to hear. Imagine your toddler telling you that they miss their real home, or that they want to visit their other mother or spouse. The confusion and even jealousy this can evoke in a parent is very real. And yet, it's usually clear the child isn't acting out of malice. They are genuinely torn between two identities and sets of attachments. Nighttime often brings the worst of it. Many of these children suffer from recurring nightmares, essentially re-experiencing their traumatic deaths. Little Julia in Sicily would wake up shrieking, yelling about men coming to get her. "They're coming! They're coming for me!" She would scream in sheer terror. Her mother would cradle her, whispering that it was just a dream. But Julia would insist in a trembling voice that, "No, they found me. They shot me, and then they threw me in the sea." How does a parent console a 5-year-old who is describing what sounds like a gangland execution? Her father, upon hearing his daughter whisper details of mafia life that no kindergartner should know, felt his blood run cold. The emotional toll on the parents, the disbelief, the creeping horror, the desperate wish to protect their child from something so strange and beyond their control cannot be overstated. The children themselves often display signs of stress When these memories flood in, they might go pale, tremble, or go into a sort of trance-like sadness when talking about the past life. When Aung Min in Myanmar recounted the moment of being shot by robbers, his breathing quickened, and he took a deep breath afterward, as if reliving the moment. These are physical manifestations of psychological weight. One can't help but wonder if the act of remembering is a way for the child to slowly unload that weight. Painful as the process might be, by sharing it with those around them. One of the most delicate aspects of these cases is the intersection of two families, the current family of the child and the past life family of the deceased. When these two worlds meet, the emotional impact is tremendous for everyone involved. Consider Niran and the widow Malay. For Niran's current parents, watching their young son run into the arms of a stranger and call her by name must have been surreal and possibly even a bit painful. For the widow Malay, it was as if a miracle and a ghost had arrived at her door simultaneously. She reportedly burst into tears and declared, "My husband, he has come back," when this little boy recognized her and old family photographs without hesitation. In that moment, the boundaries of identity blurred. Was Niran her husband? Of course not in a literal sense. He was a child with his own life to live. And yet, in other ways, yes, some essence of her husband was standing before her, offering a final goodbye or one last hug through the tiny arms of a child. Moments like these are deeply healing for some and deeply confusing for others. Some previous families find immense comfort in the encounter. The elderly Ma Thet, widow of the Burmese gold shop owner, went from skepticism to trembling belief when young Aung Min accurately described intimate details of her life with her late husband. She cried tears of both grief and relief as the boy recounted exactly how her husband was killed, details that only he could have known. It was as though she finally had a chance to hear his last words, to know his final moments, and thus to complete her own grieving process. For years she had wondered and anguished over why he never came home that night. Through this inexplicable encounter, she learned the truth and could at least lay that uncertainty to rest. However, not all such reunions are so warmly received. There are cases where the past life family cannot emotionally handle the situation, or where the child's present family is uncomfortable going further. After all, what is the proper relationship between a child and the people they claim were once their spouse or children? Socially and psychologically, it's a minefield. Some choose to maintain contact in a gentle way, treating the child with a special affection, almost like an old friend reborn, while being careful not to overstep boundaries or confuse the child. Others decide it's best to keep distance, fearing it could disturb the child's adjustment to their current life. For the child's current parents, navigating this can be an emotional tightrope. They must balance their own feelings which can include everything from protective instinct to disbelief to a strange sense of loss when their child talks about another mother with the well-being of their child. We have instances of parents who initially dismissed their child's stories until the evidence became overwhelming, at which point they had to confront a reality they never thought possible. In those moments, many parents feel a profound mix of awe and fear. Awe at the mystery that their child is part of, and fear because it upends some fundamental assumptions about life they held. One mother described feeling like her son was a stranger for a brief second when he spoke in an old tone of voice about a life in a city he'd never been. Another father admitted that he worried about encouraging delusion, only to realize that his child was suffering more by not being believed. Then there is the weight on the communities involved. In some cultures, a child who speaks of a past life might be considered blessed or even a minor celebrity. Villagers come to hear the story, elders take note, and it becomes a reaffirmation of cultural beliefs. In Samir's Druze community, for example, the elders didn't scoff. They organized an expedition to verify the boy's claims, showing how the weight of memory can mobilize an entire village. Contrast this with a place where reincarnation is not a commonly held belief, like much of the Western world. There, a family might feel very alone in dealing with this phenomenon. They might keep the child's statements private for fear of ridicule, which means the parents and child carry the weight mostly by themselves, without the buffer of communal acceptance. When young Jaden in America started talking about gang violence and being shot, his parents were plunged into isolation with their bewilderment. They eventually found confirmation in old police reports, but there was no local tradition or wise elder to guide them through the experience. This can add to the emotional strain. Not only are they dealing with a frightened child, but they have to do so while questioning their own sanity and bracing against social stigma. Despite all the turmoil, these experiences can also lead to profound moments of human connection. When the past and present collide, people from different eras and different lives are brought together in the strangest family reunion one can imagine. A child's innocent recollections can give a murder victim's relatives a sense of peace, or allow a mother to finally say goodbye to a son whose body was never found. In Nigeria, when little Obinna led his parents to a village he'd never been and pointed to an old woman saying, "I am your son," the grief and joy that erupted were beyond words. That mother, who had lost her boy 2 decades prior to an unknown fate, now held this new child who carried her son's voice and memories. She nearly collapsed in shock and then wept as she embraced him. For her, it was as if her prayer, just to know what happened, was answered by the universe in the most literal way. For Obinna's current parents witnessing this scene, There must have been a swirl of empathy and disorientation. Their son, but also someone else's son, momentarily living two lives at once in that embrace. This has been an excerpt from Reincarnation Files by Sam Elliott. Check out Elliott's new book, Paranormal Imprints, for an in-depth look to how some ghosts leave a mark on reality. Paranormal Imprints by Sam Elliott is available now.